Welcome to The Sandbox with Justin Peters, connecting you to the ideas and tools to improve your life. Now let's go. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into The Sandbox. I'm your host, Justin Peters, and with me today is my guest, James Aiken, founder and president of Legacy Search, an independent recruiting agency in South Carolina. As you all know, over the last 8 months, COVID has wreaked havoc on many industries, causing massive layoffs. I've had friends that have worked for airlines, restaurants, hotel, oil and gas, entertainment, all lose their job. And I've also heard from those that are gearing up to make a change. One of the gifts that COVID has given us is plenty of time to think, realize what's important to us, and chart out our future. That's why I thought it would be important to bring James into the sandbox to help set you up for success in your next job search. By listening to this episode, you're going to gain tons of job prep advice, such as building a candidate packet to help you stand out from the crowd, how to maximize output while minimizing time spent on job boards, and overcoming that pesky hurdle of no relevant experience. I hope you enjoy this one with my friend, James Aiken. James, welcome into the sandbox. How you doing, man?
Doing pretty well. How's everything on your end?
Everything's great. I'm excited for our conversation today. I wish it wasn't as relevant of a topic as it was, but with COVID happening in this current day time, a lot of people have found themselves out of a job over the last 6 months. And your advice and this conversation might be a lot more useful than in conventional times. I was actually recently in a job search process. I left my job in January with the intent of taking 6 months off. I was doing a 6-month sabbatical, and then I was going to jump back into the professional world. And I realized I hadn't been looking for a job in quite some time. The job search process sucks. It is tough, and it was very tough during COVID.
Yeah.
In your opinion, why does the job search process stink so much?
Well, I think it's the job search process is usually more about, well, it is just that it's the process that sucks. It's that you're going through maybe using not the best strategy when you're trying to find the next job, because a lot of people, if you have never run a job search, you have never looked for a job, or it's been years, most people, first thing that comes to mind is the job boards. Go to the job boards, apply on job boards. And, we found that there was some research done that said that actually only 5% of applicants actually get a human response, so like a phone call or a real email, and instead of just like an auto thing. And so I think the big part about what makes it suck is that people think that they're going to get like a 50% response rate, and they end up getting a 5% response rate. And so they start wondering, okay, well, what's wrong with me? Why is nobody getting back with me? Why is is it my experience? Is it this? Is it that? When really all you're hearing is a radio silence. So you start to get into this, like, you just have bad thoughts. I mean, I can't put it any other way than that. I mean, you start to think something's wrong with you, and it's not you. It's the process that you're taking to find that job. It's just, you're basically in a mosh pit with a bunch of other candidates that are all fighting over the same thing. You got 100 people, 200 people applying to the same job, unless it's specialized. So you're just kind of put in a spot where you don't have the advantage. And whenever you're constantly fighting that same fight, it can be pretty discouraging.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you hit the nail on the head there. It is super discouraging. I don't think people realize the unresponse rate you are going to get from these job boards. I mean, and we're both on the other side. We've both done some recruiting in our life. So we get the volume that comes in from a job post, and the fact that we can't reach out to all these people as well. I try to keep it in consideration because I know what it does to your psyche. I mean, I probably applied for 100 jobs during my process off of job boards. And you're right. I think I heard back from maybe 5 to 10% of them on a good day. And a lot of that's auto responses too. You get the first, like, hey, thanks for applying. Like, we'll be in touch with you. And then nothing. And it's funny. I applied for a bunch of these jobs like in July. And I just got one back last week. I got a response back that's like, oh, thanks for applying, but we found another candidate kind of deal. I'm like, this is like 75 days later.
Right. Thanks for closing the loop.
It's so brutal. Cool. So I want to talk about job boards, but first, what are some good reasons why people should be looking for a new job outside the fact that maybe they recently got displaced? But I think
Yeah.
there's probably some other reasons why people might be looking for a new job.
Well, it's not just, looking for a new job, right? Because I mean, for a lot of professionals, their time isn't really spent. Their time spent on doing their job well. It's not really spent on professional networking and looking for your next job. Because in a lot of situations, people believe their next job is going to be with their current employer. They're going to get a promotion, and so not a lot of people really put the amount of time into developing a professional network as they should. So other reasons why you would want to change jobs is just for professional growth. I mean, there's sales guys that I've talked to where, hey, maybe they want to become a manager, or maybe they want to move up in the supply chain, or the other in a different direction. I've talked with people that they're managing multi-state, they're having to do a lot of overnight work, and they want to be with their kids. They want to be home more often. They want to have more nights at home. It's not just, hey, I don't like my job, or I've got to get out because somebody's going to fire me soon. It's like it's more about what do you want to develop for yourself in your career, and thinking 5-10 years in the future and saying, how am I going to get to that? And it's kind of like when I originally came out of college, and I had a short stint at a different type job, but I eventually got into the recruiting industry, and from that job itself, I was like, I didn't know recruiting was an industry. I didn't know anything about this, and it kind of opened my eyes to the industry and how everything works. I was only recruiting at that point in time, and traditionally in the industry, there's what we call 360 recruiters, which means they develop business and they also fill the jobs. And I knew, hey, I want to, well, my long-term goal was to start my own firm, but I knew, hey, I've got to run a 360 test. So I went and figured out, okay, what are all the agencies where I can run a 360 test? Reached out to all of them. I moved over to a different company, worked there long enough, and I ended up starting my own company. So it's more of just figuring out, okay, well, where do I want to be? It's not just an interview question. It's a question about your own life. Where do I want to be in 5 or 10 years? What do I want to accomplish? What do I want my life to look like? And that's what you should take into consideration when you're doing professional networking. And it's not just looking for a new job. It's looking to improve your career and lifestyle all around.
Mm.
You always want to be progressing. If you're not getting that from your current company, a lot of people will complain about, maybe it's a small family company and there's only so much vertical movement there. Or, some people say that it's a very big company and they're so process oriented and the directors have been there so long and I'll never have a shot. And so sometimes you do have to make a change externally to get the type of experience or to meet the kind of goals that you want for your career.
Mm. Well, you hit your long-term goal pretty quickly then. So
Yeah.
you knew right away. Did you know you wanted to work for yourself, or as soon as you got into recruiting, you knew you wanted to open up your own independent agency?
Yeah, so technically, part of my degree is in entrepreneurship. And so I always knew I wanted to have, I wanted to be a business owner and I wanted to, be independent and work for myself. And, and yeah, like I said, I didn't even know recruiting was a thing. I had seen like recruiting franchises, and I saw, okay, I got to spend this money to start this. But once I got inside the company and I started to get, wow, you can basically start a company with one person. That's when it was like the light bulb was on, and I'm like, all right, I can really make this happen if I just focus on it. If I focus on the steps, I can get to that point.
Can you briefly explain how the industry works? I'm assuming a lot of people probably think recruiting only comes internally from the company. So whenever you say independent agency, what do you mean?
So it's crude, it's nasty, but the way I say it's just human trafficking. It's legal human trafficking, okay? Well, it's legal, completely legal. But what we're doing is companies that have a hard time, either they need somebody with a very specific skill set that they don't either have the resources or the ability to reach into that market. They would work with an agency that would find that person for them, or maybe they already know the person, they immediately introduce them. And so that's really what we're doing. So just like if you were a company and you have a marketing department that doesn't know how to run Facebook ads, Well, you would work with a Facebook ad agency and they would do all that for you. It's just a way of outsourcing a certain process. And most of the time, it's either smaller companies that don't have a recruiting department, or it's larger companies that they do have a recruiting department, but there is so much else on the plate. There's so much going on. And the what would you call it? The essentially the rate of return on their time isn't best spent working on the specific job. If it's going to take 20, 40, 60 legitimate hours of work to get it done, well, usually they have a lot more than just one job opening on their plate. Internals will run anywhere from 5, 10, sometimes 20 plus, depending on the level of work that they're working on. And you can't, if it's an urgent situation and you don't want it to take 180 days to fill, and you'd rather have somebody in the seat in 30 or 45 days, then they just want to get the problem off their shoulders as soon as possible. And especially in the case of salespeople, get the territory producing, get them making money, or in the case on the other side, have somebody in there that's going to be saving them money sooner than later. There's a good ROI on the investment ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't realize some of these agencies niche down so narrow, and you have a very specific target in terms of the companies that you help with and the kind of people that you place. What is that?
Yeah, so we work in the building materials industry, which is kind of lumped in with construction naturally. It's really how I explain the difference is construction is the act, and building materials is the supply. So it's just all of, whether it's windows or roofing or carpet or whatever, drywall, concrete, these are the kind of things that would be in the building materials industry. So whether you're manufacturing it or supplying it or installing it, well, that's where it gets tricky because the installation side's in there as well. But that's really where we play. And there's a lot of other firms that we compete with in that industry, and then there's also firms that'll niche down based on their function, like IT or lawyers or accountants or whatever. You usually have your best long-term success when you're playing in a small pool, and you can kind of dominate that pool and just really know as many people in the market as possible that's going to serve your clients. So that's why people usually niche down.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for the overview. So jumping back into the job search process for the individual, you actually recommend some preparation before you even start job searching. You have this concept called the candidate packet. Can you explain what's included in the candidate packet?
So in an ideal world, when somebody's following everything that I say, essentially it comes with four different pieces of information. And we're giving it to our what I would say is like high value opportunities, like it's something you really, really want and you're willing to put this extra time into. Or if you're sitting down for a face-to-face, or in this world that we're in, maybe a video interview, it's better to go ahead and make one of these. But it's four pieces. So first we've got the cover letter. Cover letters should literally always be one-off. They should be signature. They should be completely unique and written specifically for that opportunity, for that company. Essentially all it is you're giving your elevator pitch for this specific thing. That's how I say you should really approach that. Next page is the resume. Everybody's got the resume, right? People get the resume. Very simple. All I say is don't make it multiple pages. Focus on achievements over your experience. So instead of saying, I hate to use sales over and over, but instead of saying, hey, I'm a sales manager and I manage 10 people in Wyoming. Well, instead it should be, as a sales manager, grew the team from 5 to 10 salespeople over 3 years, improved the close rate for homeowners from 30% to 40%, whatever it might be. We want to give raw details like a baseball card. Essentially, if you could tell somebody, obviously somebody that's going to hire you, or even your own boss, if you could ask your own boss, all right, what are my best stats? That's basically what you want to give them, because you're trying to just hook them with that information. And I said, make the resume as readable as possible, very quick, very easy. Don't make it intimidating for the reader. And think about, ultimately, your resume is an advertisement. The call to action there is for them to either email you or call you. So always keep that in mind. You don't want somebody that's, just reading it and just, reading it like a book, essentially. You want somebody that you're going to grab them immediately within those first 30 seconds, the first, minute, that they're like, this person's the real deal. I need to at least talk with them. And then they'll take that next step into making the connection. Third page, because a lot of people complain, and some mid-career people make a good point, which they say, hey, well, the resume, if we make it short and make it sweet and make it simple, it is, maybe it doesn't cover all the stuff that I want to cover. I don't want to cut out this, I don't want to cut out that. And so I say, all right, well, fine, we'll do an achievements page on the next page, which is essentially like not like an addendum that kind of looks like going through a couple of case studies, where you'd say, okay, well, number one, I improved, or I grew the territory from 8 million to 17 million over 5 years. And this is how I did it. This is what I did to do that. Going through really in longer answer format, maybe a couple of sentences, giving more detail on how you achieved the things that you cite in your resume. And that's a situation where if somebody wants to learn more and they want to, get deeper information, they can, but you're not like muddying up the entire resume with all this information. Last page is, say, a pre-written reference. So from a previous manager is usually the best way to go. I would almost say you don't want anything other than a previous manager, but sometimes, there are specific cases where maybe you've been at the same job for 10 years and you've had the same manager for 10 years. And, where in that case, maybe you want to get a peer reference, or maybe a customer reference, or someone you work with externally reference. But for 90% of people, it's going to be the managerial reference. And the reason that you do that instead of saying, contact me for references, is you want them to go ahead. It's in your best interest to go ahead and give them that information, go ahead and give them that proof, give them the recommendation, essentially, of your character and your background. A big part of e-commerce, and if you go to Amazon, you go wherever, you're going to have people on there that they obviously cite their customer reviews, and that's essentially what you're wanting to do. You want the social proof along with everything you're saying. Say, don't just take my word for it. Here's Josh Allen, and he said I was great. It's kind of that situation. So and it takes a little bit more work, but you think about, other than the cover letter, which, we do that in specific situations, reworking it could take, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, maybe. And it's just like, if you front load all that work, it just helps your conversion rates later on in the process at a much larger degree. And plus, hey, it does look kind of nice if you're sitting down for a face-to-face and you're setting down, instead of a one-page resume, you're basically giving an entire packet of information. You're giving them the business, basically. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're making it pretty compelling. And then you also stand out because no one else is doing this, because it takes 30 minutes. Oh man. But no one else is taking that extra step. And I may have quoted this to you on our first conversation, but it always reminds me of the movie Waiting, back from, I don't know, maybe early 2000s or something. I used to wait tables, so I was in love with this movie. And when he's watching the training video back in the little manager's room, which is like the size of half of a broom closet, they say the only difference between ordinary and extraordinary is that little bit extra. Mm. And it's so true, where it's just like, just take that little bit extra step, just to do that little bit extra and remove yourself from everyone else. They say in business, you want to focus on your core differentiators, because whether or not the differentiator makes you better or worse, it's just what makes you different. How can you stand out in a way? If you're getting lost in a sea of everyone that looks the same, it's hard for somebody to pick you. But if you look different and there's a different twist to everything, you stand out, people are going to give you more attention and more time and more consideration than, what would look like just a rank and file.
Mm. I totally agree with that. Over all the years of recruiting I've done, mostly through the graduate side, I've recruited a lot of college students, and the ones that really stand out to me are the ones that do include more than just here's my resume, and if I need to fill out an application, here's the application. But the ones that go above and beyond, and it's not even all of this, but just a simple cover letter that I felt like they changed up a little bit, and rather than a follow-up email, which a lot of people don't even do follow-up emails, which is like such
Yeah.
conventional wisdom. Someone just gives me a call and just, hey, just want to check in. How were things? Thanks again I really appreciate you giving me some of your time. Or just a call before I even get, I've had the resume for 2 days. They give me a call. Hey, I applied. Really excited about this opportunity. Just wanted to see if you got a chance to look at my resume. Let me know if there's any questions you have. In a simple call like that, when you talk about the extra and the extraordinary piece, like it just blew me away.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of, I've never suggested this to anybody, but you saying that reminds me that, if you wanted to follow up in a certain way like that, now there's, programs like Loom where you can just do a 1 minute video real quick for them, get a little bit closer to that face to face by providing your face,
Yeah.
right? And so if you follow up with an email and you've got that quick little video of saying, hey, just wanted to say I'm really excited about this company. I appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation and just wanted to introduce myself and face to face or whatever quote. That kind of angle is again just going to separate you from everyone else, because I agree with the same thing. When there's people that take the extra step, you're always going to give them consideration. I mean, it's because they're getting out of the noise. I mean, if somebody is sitting there calling you, emailing you, you basically have to make yourself hard to ignore. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that a lot of people worry, like, okay, well, what if I bug them? What if they don't like me? What if I piss them off? And it's like, think about this in the grand scheme of things. It's your career. You've got 40, 50 years in it. Or if you're a person like me, you only want a couple years. But it's taking the it's basically saying, like, why would you want to put yourself at a disadvantage just because someone else might not like what you're doing? Like, why would you hinder or restrict your own life and your own success and your own uh, career growth because some person that you just found on LinkedIn 30 seconds ago might not like what you said. So it's kind of like, just focus on your own career and focus on how you want to grow it, and just push as hard as you can to get it done.
Yeah, preach, James. I appreciate that. I just made a post a couple days ago about people self-rejecting and like people assuming like,
Yeah,
oh my gosh, I don't want to, I'm not going to send this because I'm going to be bothering them kind of deal. And
yeah,
very few times I've maybe had, I don't know, 1,000 applicants over the last 5 or 6 years that I've seen. And there is maybe less than a half a dozen people that have annoyed me with follow up and checking in. Like it's just not
yeah.
an issue. Like I don't know why people would ever even think that that's a problem.
Yeah, it really isn't. And I mean, because the only thing, it's like, and on the recruiter side, if you have someone like that, all we do is we're 100% honest with the situation. Like, hey, I don't have anything for you, or maybe this isn't right for you. And, you kind of cut it off. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's not like, anybody's trying to be mean or do anything wrong. It's just like, they're going to give you a flat out objective answer. If you're, not hearing anything and you need an update, then get the update.
Yeah.
But they're not going to be upset with you because they understand why you're reaching out. There's a reason why you're doing this, and they know it. So I mean, they can't hide from it. And remember, unless this is a case of where you have applied to their job, sometimes people will reach out to you and ask you to do stuff, and then it's like, well, then they kind of are obligated to respond to you because they're the one that reached out to you. So it's yeah, no, I'm right there with you.
Agreed. So jumping back to the job board, you you have a quote here that says job boards aren't where you should put where your focus should be. So do you think job boards have a purpose, and if so, how should we be utilizing them?
Oh yeah, for sure. So job boards absolutely have a purpose. to serve the shareholders of the business. No, I'm just kidding. Basically, the job boards are there for an obvious reason, right? A company pays to put their job on there, and the companies pay ZipRecruiter and Indeed and all these different providers in order to get access to the resume databases and in order to get access to that traffic, those people that are looking for jobs. And so naturally, yes, there is a reason why you would want to be on the job boards. There's jobs there. You can apply for them and you can find opportunities there. And so my issue is overspending time on it, or spending too much time on it, because a lot of people will get on there and they want to read every job description and look at all the qualifications and decide whether or not they want to pursue certain things, or and it ultimately just hurts their absolute results, because whenever you don't have high volumes, you don't get very high returns. You don't get a lot of attention, and if you're taking very small numbers and applying on a very small amount of jobs, don't be surprised when you hear back on a much smaller amount of jobs. And so what I say is, you want to aim for volume. There are ways that you can, if you wanted to, it's probably sloppy and I've never done it myself, but there are ways that you can get software that will basically just boom, apply for every single job on there, on Indeed at least. And, you don't necessarily want to do that, but I would say type in the keywords on what you want. If it's sales in a certain industry or engineer or whatever, type it in and just boom, apply to as many as you can, knock them all out. I would say you probably want to do it on Monday for an hour or two in the morning, and then wait until next week, and then filter all of the job results by the last week, and then hit the new ones that next week, and just keep it rolling like that, and focus on that. Really, the important part of that process is obviously, volume, but we also want to, if there's a job that you are really interested in, set it to the side and consider it something that, okay, I applied here, and now who am I going to follow up with? What person am I going to talk with? Can I get in touch with the hiring manager? Can I get in touch with an organizational leader or HR or whatever? Or really not ors, we kind of want ands there. Can we get in touch with all these different people within this company to kind of promote my background for this role and break through the noise? And so that's really where you're going to be most effective, is going for volume, filtering the replies, and then taking the roles that you have a lot of interest in, and then just pushing really hard on those. That's really what I see as a job search or a job board strategy.
Yeah, I wish I would have met you while I was looking for a job, and I would have gotten that piece of advice, because I spent way too much time on job boards, and it took a huge hit on my psyche too, because you expect to hear back from all these job boards, and I applied for all these jobs, and then by the end of the week, I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't heard from any of them. I spent all the time I set aside for job search into the job board process, and now I'm feeling like shit, and I don't want to do it all over again next week, because I've done it for 6 straight weeks.
Well, exactly. And it's just it's also when you talk about psyche, it's also you're put in a situation where you're in the passenger seat. You're applying for jobs and you're waiting to hear back. It's basically completely out of your control, unless you're following up directly like we say you should. But in the case of developing a professional network, you're getting those outcomes, you're getting those relationships, and you're getting those results, and you're talking with people that understand the value that your career has and the value that your experiences could bring to a specific company. And so it goes from a sense of, I'm not in control, I'm feeling a lot of majority rejection, to, okay, I'm talking with people that get it, that are from my industry, that, are from my function, and, they're recognizing what I can do, and I can see myself meeting, more and more people, getting more access to different companies. You're actually getting to build something. You're building an asset really for your entire career when you do this. And so that's why I'm like, hey, there's a reason for the job boards, but if you want a long-term solution, you got to go with networking.
Yeah, so I think we beat up job boards enough. Let's dive into networking, or what you call network development. So you have this concept of creating two top 10 lists. Can you explain the two top 10 lists and how you utilize those for networking?
Yeah, so that's really where I say everybody should get started, because a lot of times when I ask candidates, hey, what companies are you interested in? And most people are like, yeah, I don't really know, maybe just, in the industry. And whenever you're actively searching for a job, if you want to, get into professional or develop a professional network, you need to think of two different things, right? So first is the personal, is what are 10 companies that I would want to work with? What are 10 companies that I'm excited by, I'm interested with, are notorious in my local market and I'd like to learn more about, get those down. And on the other side, we're thinking externally, okay? So, or the companies looking in, like what companies are going to benefit most from hiring somebody with my background? And that's really, in the case of, I always give the example, in the case of a window salesperson, if you're, selling windows to contractors in Atlanta, chances are you're going to want to contact all the window dealers, all the window distributors, possibly the window manufacturers. You're one, or if you want to get out of windows, okay, well, contact the flooring dealer that's selling to contractors, or the roofing dealer that's selling to contractors. Figure out where the overlap is strong, and go after those, because you usually like to start with the what do they call it, the low hanging fruit, right? And obviously, if you can get in front of the people that recognize and need your talents most, you're going to get the best results right out of the gate.
Mm. So you built the two top 10 list. What do I do now?
Yeah. So, well, at that point, that's really where the networking comes in. So, let's say you're basically building out points of contact within each company. So, the standard situation would be to select 3 or 4 different people. So, we're going to include HR. We're going to include your functional leader. So, let's say if you're in engineering, the VP of engineering. If you're in sales, VP of sales. If you're, in IT, VP of IT. If And then you also want to aim towards who would ultimately be your boss. So you could call it a functional supervisor. So again, salesperson, sales manager, engineering manager, accounting manager, standard stuff, right? And then next, the fourth person, which is really just trying to like knock it out of the park, is just going with a flat out organizational leader, like a president, like a CEO, possibly a general manager, depending on the company. Everybody has a different size and a different leadership type, but you basically want to go to the head of the company. You might not be able to get Elon Musk on the phone necessarily, but so you have to be careful with what companies you're trying to do this with. But that's usually the 4 points of contact that I would say you want to go with whenever you're marketing your information, because you want to get it in front of, again, the people that would see the most value out of that. And that's going to be your functional leaders, an organizational leader, and then human resources.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. Then how do you go about finding those people? And then once you found those people, what do you say?
So this is a good question, because, hey, we're in the recruiting industry. This is what I have to do all the time, right? And so it comes down to, you can use LinkedIn. You can use their websites. Sometimes they have organizational charts on the websites, not necessarily, the very bottom, but a lot of times they'll have the VPs, executive leadership. Um, and whenever it comes to like getting their phone numbers or getting their emails, there's plenty of different tools that you can use. There's one tool that I use called Seamless. I mean, there's not many unpaid tools that you can get accurate numbers on, but there's ways of getting it. We'll just say that much. You can also, which is a pretty normal, standard way, just call it the business. Sometimes they'll even be in the digital directory, or whatever they call it. If you know the person, you just type in their name and it'll take you directly to them. If you don't know the person, call up the receptionist. Say, hey, who's your head of sales? Hey, who's your head of engineering? And then they'll tell you. I mean, it's the last thing you want to do is overthink it. It's more about, like, if you can accurately identify the people that are in these positions, then getting their contact information really won't be that difficult. Even if you have to guess emails, first name dot last name at their domain, or first initial of their first name and then last name at domain. It's kind of like you can find one way, or you can email them. I mean, there's a zillion different ways. You can send them a package. It all depends on how you want to take it. But yeah, all the information's out there on how you would get directly connected.
Yeah, being in sales, I've done tons of this before. There's lots of software programs out there like hunter.io
Yeah,
is a good one where you can go to the website. I think it gives you 50 free searches a month. So go to their website. You can click on it's like a add-on tool, and it will show you the most common domain format. So it'll tell you if it's first initial, last name, whatever. So I use that a ton. I did use LinkedIn a lot. You can use the advanced search function on LinkedIn and find people pretty easily, especially if you're in white collar work. Most people are on LinkedIn nowadays.
yeah.
And it's not like for me, it was a little bit tougher because I was selling, and lots of the receptionists knew, hey, we're not interested. I'm gonna flag you, or I'm gonna hold you back from this. But if you're trying to get to in front of somebody because you think you might offer valuable talent in terms of like bringing them on, I think people would be a little bit more receptive of it. And speaking of that, I heard a story from you and I thought it was super fascinating because you're not one of these guys that just talks the talk. You also walk the walk. So in terms of networking, I heard this story where you wanted to meet one of these owners in your market, and I think you were getting blocked by the receptionist, or your email wasn't getting responded to a couple times. So you went to the office parking lot at 6 a.m. And in order to meet somebody. Is this true?
Yeah, so basically, and I'm in one of his competitors' buildings right now, but basically there's this guy, Bo Autry, that runs Windsor Autry. There's a partner at Windsor Autry. And yeah, I emailed, tried real hard to get some attention, never heard back. Walked up to the receptionist multiple days, never heard back. Always, oh, well, we'll drop him the note. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I was just like, you know what? Screw this. I say he had to take an elevator up to his office every day. And so I was like, I'm just gonna sit at the bottom of the elevator. So I got up at like 5:30 and I got out to his office at 6 a.m. and I did just that. I sat in front of the elevator and waited. And he came in the door and he walked right by me because he didn't know who I was, because the receptionist probably didn't tell him, right? And so he immediately walks by me and goes into the hotel, has a meeting, and I'm like, dang, well, I got to basically stalk him here. So I sat down at a nearby table and waited for him. I see a car pull up in the front of the hotel, and then he gets up, shakes his hand, starts walking towards his car. And so I'm like, geez, I bet he's hopping in that car. And so that's right whenever I'm like, hey, I said, Mr. Autry, been trying to get in touch with you. I just graduated from USC with a degree in real estate. I'm very interested in commercial real estate here in the local market. I'm from here, and I know you're really influential around here. So do you have some time to just talk about, what the best options for me would be, or where I could basically go with this? And he was like, well, I'm about to run here, but he's like, if you come back here at, I can't remember what time it was. We'll just say 1 o'clock. If you come back here, I'll give you, we can go up my office and talk. And that's exactly what we did. And so ended up getting that connection and kind of building that relationship. And it was just, sometimes you got, if you really, that's why I say, like, everybody, you can get in contact with anybody, literally anybody. It's just it's how bad do you want to get in contact with them? I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say, hey, show up at their home address or whatever. But, it's like they're out there. They're living and breathing. You're living and breathing. Just like make the connection. There's nobody that's inaccessible. So it's just, figuring out how can I access them.
That is such a badass story. How'd you get the courage to do that? Have you always been someone that's like, I want to meet someone, I'm going to meet them?
Well, I didn't really have a choice. That's how I see a lot of these things, where it's like, it's not a matter of like courage. It's just, this isn't going to get done unless I do this. It's like, if I want X and I have to do Y, there's no way around it. There's no, option for nervousness or, thinking, overblowing it. It's just like, okay, I have to do this, and so I'm just going to do it.
Yeah, yeah,
That,
you say that, but I think a lot of people wouldn't even take that step. I don't think a lot of people would be like, "Oh man, he didn't reply to my first email," or the receptionist said, they would let him know and I never heard back and they'd stop there.
yeah, well, I mean, I wanted the outcome. It depends. Like I said, it depends how bad you want the outcome. I mean, is it worth investing the time, investing the energy? I mean, that's for everybody else to decide on their end in their specific situation. But for me, and I'm also a chump for the sunk cost fallacy. So I am a chump for it. So I'm like, I'm already in so much. I'm getting my result. Period. I'm getting something out of this, and I'm not going to be blown off like some punk. And so it had gotten to the point where I'm like, one way or another, I'm getting in front of this guy.
I love that story, James. Back to LinkedIn. Is there
Yep.
how do candidates optimize their LinkedIn?
So same situation as the resume, really. I would say, the people that are writing these super long summaries and writing it like, long form copy and, including emojis and doing all this stuff, I don't think it looks that good. It's probably not the best because, again, all I say is consider the reader. Okay, consider the reader. Think about who's going to be reading this, what do they want to read, like what's going to hook them, what's going to show them that I am a quintessential associate in this industry or in this function. And so if you want to do the summary, it's a quick rundown of basically, maybe 2 or 3 sentences on functionally what you do, and that's really about it. And just using the key, smart keywords based on your industry and based on your function. And then on the experience level below, where they have all their job spots, same thing. I mean, do 4 bullet points on your most recent job, 2 on the one behind that, and then maybe 1 or 2 or none on the other ones. Make sure that you have a good photo. I mean, seriously, a lot does come into play in just having a professional photo up there. Not one in your truck, not one that you maybe took, I don't know, with your iPhone. Maybe you can get a good one with your iPhone, but it needs to look professional. You don't want it to be, a group photo that you decided to like zoom into your face on. It's just because the whole thing is, and the mindset lumps in along with the candidate packet, is it's about just showing the intent. So are you willing to look professional on here? Are you willing to get a good picture up there? You don't want to look low effort. Nobody wants to hire somebody or pursue somebody or recommend somebody that looks like they're giving no or low effort. So it's really just about, you don't have to make it be this, Mona Lisa. You don't have to make it be this amazing, long form copy to, convert people to calling you directly. It's just look polished. Have your headline be what you want, what your job is, or what you want your job to be. You know, um, Obviously give your contact information. I would say maybe even sometimes you can do it in the header. It looks cleaner if you don't, but if you do it in the summary, just make sure they have your phone number and your email. Make sure that, because again, just like a resume, your call to action, it's really on LinkedIn. It's to get them to message you because they're on the platform. But if you're not connected and maybe they don't have emails, then give them an option to email you or to call you. And so that's really what it's for. It's just optimize. It's just the digital presence is there to get you to the personal presence. Whenever you're creating all this, that's ultimately the mindset or the goal that you should have in mind is how do I present this in a way that makes them want to call me or contact me or whatever it may be. So it's not a very complicated situation. And you also want to get, I mean, if you can get recommendations on there as well, great. And I'm not talking about, I guess they call them testimonials on there. I don't know if it's testimonial or recommendation, but written recommendations from your, whether it's previous people you've worked with or previous managers. If you can build that out, that does help a lot because it helps you stand out. But aside from that, there's not really a whole lot that you need to focus on. Just hit the big four basically, and make it look clean and crisp, and make it obvious how to contact you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think just the concept of the low effort versus high effort is a really great thing to apply across the whole forum. Like, once again, it is such a turnoff to see people without professional photos or without photos at all that might have their two job titles that they've had, and it's like a
Yeah,
blank
no
LinkedIn. Like,
dates.
just
Yeah,
delete your LinkedIn, or the people
yeah,
who you flip to their other social media, and it's just like, ugh. And
yeah,
you know my audience, like, you're speaking to 20 somethings. Like, some people know this very well, and if they're looking for a job, they tighten up the social media. But we forget often that employers can be looking at your social media just
yeah,
as much as your friends and your family can be looking at it. So just be a little
yeah.
bit more polished, especially if you're actively looking for a job at the time, because you're right. I'm looking for somebody, at least on paper, that's checking all the boxes. I tell a lot of people it's more about getting yeses than nos. Like, I'm not looking for, I'm looking for a reason to say no to you. And if you don't give me a reason to say no to you, I'm probably bringing you to the next stage of the process.
Exactly.
So one question that I have, that's really relevant to my audience, is addressing the no relevant experience piece to it. So it could be somebody that is a recent graduate that maybe only has internship experience, or maybe even no prior internship experience, or somebody that has spent a couple years in retail or fast food or whatever it may be, and they're looking to start their journey into their professional career. How do you advise people to address, both on the front end, no relevant experience on my resume, and whenever it comes to the interview, how do I address them asking about any relevant experience that applies to this job?
So it's a super controversial answer. Reason being, it is tough because you got to think about it this way. You're basically placing all of the risk. If you're one of these candidates, you're placing all of the risk on the shoulders of the hiring manager, because you're saying, I can do this, which may be true. You're saying, I can do this. I don't have any proof I can do it, and nobody will vouch for me, but just give me a shot. And if you've been in recruiting a while, you hear just give me a shot a lot. And I got to say, it's usually not the best candidates that say, just give me a shot, just give me a chance. And so we have to think about this. How do we remove, and that's the reason that they ultimately don't get hired, because there's so much risk involved. Am I willing to invest a month, even a month's, salary, maybe a couple of months? How are we, what's the exit plan if it doesn't work out? That's why that it makes it so difficult. So, and what is the risk, right? It's the risk of time and money. And so, if you really want to get this done, if you want to be successful in getting this done, here's a little story. And I'm glad you mentioned retail. A little story I heard the other day where it was this kid in high school, and he actually wanted to get into retail. It was a higher end retail place, but he wanted to get into retail. He couldn't get any attention from the manager. They basically shoot him off. And he comes back the next day, and he just, he goes in and he starts folding clothes. Doesn't say anything to anybody. Nothing, just starts folding the clothes that are messed up and just putting them, boom, boom, putting them all into place, boom. And once he does, I think they said maybe an hour or two or something, he just left. Came back the next day, same time, same thing, boom, folding up these things. And the manager's like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I want to work here. He's like, do you have any other work for me? And then it's kind of like, all right, you definitely got the attention of the hiring manager at that point, because you've invested in them, right? So it's a law of reciprocation. The more you give, the more somebody feels like they should be giving as well. And so you're front loading everything by going ahead and working for them. You don't even have to give the approval, right? I mean, this is the case for retail shops, so maybe a little bit different if you're trying to get into engineering or something like that. But it's about ultimately the focus is, how do I get the risk off the shoulders of the hiring manager? And so sometimes that does come with working for free. Yes, there's that like chicken and the egg. Oh, well, I can't get any relevant experience because I can't get hired in the job. Well, I think the problem is getting hired, right? I think that seems to be the problem. And so if you're willing to invest in your own career and your own future by working, yeah, for free, well, at least you're getting that experience. Maybe you don't work for the same person. Maybe if you do it for a couple of weeks and it doesn't get anywhere. You go somewhere else and you say, hey, I worked over for, Joseph or whatever for a month doing this. What do you think about, bringing me in at an entry level or whatever? It's the thing is, if you don't have the experience, then guess what? Your first thought should be, how do I get the experience?
Mm,
And if the first thing that comes up is, well, nobody will pay me for it. Well, do you want the experience or do you not? Do you want to
yes.
get the experience or not? Because you're going to be in the exact same spot, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now. I can't remember the guy's name. Well, he's a partner with Warren Buffett now, but there was one fellow that like went and worked for Warren Buffett for like a year for free, which is a different story, right? I mean, I would probably work for him for a year, but the reason is because he's getting that experience. He's getting that value. It's making him a better investor long term. He knows, hey, I might not be getting paid right now, but there's this intangible capital that you're getting by basically raising your per hour like service level. Basically, if you can perform more complicated things and more effective things for employers, you're going to make more money. It's kind of a standard situation.
I love this thread so much, and so many people don't think about it. And I'm not speaking to the people out there that are like, man, I really, really need money bad right now. I'm in a bad situation.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you can give up, 3 weeks, 3 months, of your time in trade for connection and for experience, I think it
Yeah.
is well worth the trade, because you can bump yourself into a higher role down the long run and recoup, if not come up on top within 3 years in terms of what the money was that you lost in that 3 weeks or 3 months. And so many people don't think about doing that, but you're right. In terms of hiring talent, it's a big risk that a lot of companies are taking. So if they're not sure on you, find a way to make them sure on you. And you even mentioned
Yeah.
it. You tweeted, and you have a great Twitter, by the way. I'm going to let you plug it at the end.
Thanks.
I want people to follow you on Twitter just because I think you put out so much good micro content out there. But you had a tweet out there explaining how you pitch a CEO, and you mentioned like, hey, if you want to work for somebody, if you're doing user interface experience, go to their website, critique their website, give them
Yeah.
a full rundown of something that you saw, or product defect, or here's a marketing campaign that I think could be successful in your company.
Yeah.
I had a guy on a couple episodes ago as well, and he does consulting as a speech consultant, and he really, really wanted to work with this one guy. So we went out to YouTube, found one of his speeches he gave, watched it, wrote all the notes for his speech, and gave him like, hey, here's 3 areas that I think you could have really improved on in this speech,
Yeah.
and pitched it to him, and gave it to
Yeah.
him, and he said he emailed him back and he said, how much do you charge per hour? like
Nice.
that's how he went out and
Yeah.
found one of his clients. And I don't think a lot of people take that avenue.
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing. I call it like the slingshot theory, right? That you got to go backwards to go forward. But it's really, like you said earlier, just the law of reciprocation. And I'm a big fanboy of Russell Brunson, and his whole thing is, if you're serving, it's like, just think about serving. The quicker that you want that dollar back, probably the less you're going to make. If
Yeah.
you start thinking about how do I become vulnerable, and basically just give. How do I just give and help others? And if you're putting positivity out into the world, I know it sounds lame, but hey, it's the truth. If you're putting positive things out in the world and you're doing positive things, it always is going to come back. There's no schematic that will prove it, but it really is just the reality. The older I get, the more I understand it. And that's kind of how you have to operate. And it's smart that he did it that way, because we used to pitch in that way as well, where I would go on to companies like their job board, on their corporate job board, because we have a specific offering that helps the situation. But we would go onto the job board, I'd do a screen share, and I'd say, hey, here's how you guys have this set up right now, and here's an example of what it could look like if we basically you went with how we have everything set up, and show them why. Okay, this is your standard, and this is we want to use the word improvement sometimes, because some people will get don't want to be told that their thing isn't doing well, but it's just it's how do you just give first, just keep investing in the other person, give first, and it'll come back. Because especially with like what you're talking about, if it's a very specific person, if it's a very hard to get to person, a very influential person, you have to give first. But imagine if, in the case of, me or in real estate, what if you could work with the best developer in the region? In Dallas, like if you're in Dallas and you had the opportunity to work with the most successful developer in Dallas, but you had to work for him for 3 months for free. I mean, I think anybody that's in the industry would snap at that. Maybe not the people that are not in the industry yet, but I think with a lot of people, they kind of, you get that because you're getting, even though you're giving first, you're getting all these intangible things that are just going to help you long term.
I so I so freaking agree with that, James. I love your energy, man. It's been a great conversation. Before I ask my last question, where can people find you if they want to get connected with you?
Yeah, so the Twitter, as they say, is I think it's just Legacy GVL. So the
Mm-hmm.
handle is just Legacy GVL. But if you want our, it's basically a candidate marketing guide to get a general strategy. We have it for free on candidatemarketingtips.com. Just putting your name and email there. Aside from that, I mean, hey, my most famous platform may be LinkedIn. Just type in James Aiken, and if I don't show up, let me know because I should be the very first person there.
And
Um,
and we'll throw those links into the show notes so you're easy to find. I highly encourage people to go and grab your guide. I think it was a very useful guide to go through. So if you're in the midst of a job search or thinking about starting a job search, I think it is a great place to start. You put together a really great piece of content there. So I appreciate it. My final question for you is, all of us have things that we wish we would have started earlier. This is something I've learned as I've gotten older. There's just a couple habits that I'm like, man, if I would have started that 2 years, 3 years, 5 years ago, where would I be? And I
yeah.
appreciate the fact that I have started it now. My question is there a habit that you have that you wish you would have started at 20 years old?
Like a daily habit or like a
You
ritual, or what do you
you
mean?
can take it whatever direction you would like. If you want to stay focused on the job search or your career or anything off topic, go for it.
Probably just thinking bigger and thinking about bigger problems and building very large from the beginning.
Hmm.
Because, and I read this article yesterday that it was talking about, which I don't want to go on too long of a diatribe here, but it was talking about like the $10 million mindset versus like a $50 million mindset. And I've always believed this to be like generational based on your economic circumstances, where usually people that are either directly in the situation where they're not making a lot of money and they grow up from that and they start, actually being very successful, or if you're the children of that first generation where they kind of instill that same mindset into your mind where you're playing defense a lot of time. You can get rich working for a corporation. You can make a lot of money doing the standard suit and tie thing. I mean, it's completely possible. And so the problem is, or in their argument, they say the problem is they're playing defense. They're not figuring out how to knock the ball out of the park. They're figuring out how to not go back to that crap life that they had where they felt like crap all the time. They're much more appreciative of what they have. And they said, well, the next generation, usually what happens is it goes one of two ways. But it does have one main theme, is that you start to I got to be careful how I say this, but they start to understand that money isn't real, that there's not really a chance of true failure, because whenever somebody, unfortunately, well, maybe not unfortunately, but usually when you fail and you have a lot of money, there's ways you can just kind of band-aid over everything. Eventually you do get too big to fail unless you're making just gigantic bets on certain things. And so they're saying that these kids will go one of two ways. They'll either become completely either parasitic, lazy, lame, not doing anything because they're like, oh, well, it doesn't really matter which way I go because I can still end up in my parents' mansion. I still have this money that I'm inheriting. I still have all this. Everything's set up for me. It doesn't really matter how bad I fail because, who cares? It's all set up for me. And then on the other side of the coin, there's the kids that are like, man, it doesn't matter how bad I fail, so I can do anything. I can aim as high as I want because it doesn't really matter. It doesn't, I can, I can shoot for the moon. I can work on something that could take 5 or maybe even 10 years to profit on because I have this giant safety net right here. And so to bring it all the way back, it's just thinking bigger. And instead of thinking about how can I work harder, how can I build bigger systems, and how can I leverage my time and my dollars per hour that I'm making from my active time? How can I continue to leverage that up? Because in a lot of situations, and especially early on in the business, it was always how hard can I work? And no matter how hard, I would keep going through this, working long hours, doing a lot of calls. And then I just start thinking, am I ever going to outperform, even if I'm a perfect recruiter, great recruiter, how am I ever going to outperform 4 or 5 people that are average? There's no chance in hell I can possibly outperform 4 or 5 different people, no matter how good I get. It's just not going to happen. There's not enough time in the day. And so then you start to think, okay, well, these are bigger problems. These are bigger, well, if I want to support 4 or 5 of these people, this is how much revenue I need. This is how much I need here. This is what I need here. And then it just becomes, a completely different equation, a completely different mindset. Because I came from a situation where we weren't, super well off. And so I always thought you just work hard. The harder you work, the more successful you can be. It's just hard work, until eventually you figure out it is hard work, but it's a different kind of work, because it's how do I remove my work from my time? How do I continue to be successful, and how do I continue to profit and do all these things without having to use my time as the variable, or as the, what ultimately creates the end game? How can I create something independent of me? So very long answer, but I think with a lot of sales guys and a lot of, commission focused people, that's always their mindset is, okay, well, hey, I did 100 this year. Well, how can I do 200? Instead of thinking, how can I do 1,000,000? Can I do 1,000,000 by myself? You're not going to profit 1,000,000, obviously, but it's how can I do something that's net, or that's revenue line is going to be $1,000,000? Or, if I was an affiliate or whatever, how can I do something that's going to scale way past, maybe what would, a 10 or a 20% raise year over year is amazing in corporate land. So it's how can I make something that could just scale way, way, way past that, where I'm not, I don't have to, I can double my income without doubling my input, kind of situation. So very long answer, but that's really what I would do. I would build, well, they always say you're supposed to build to sell, but build to sell the first day, instead of, starting more as a freelancer and a team freelancer and a contractor and all this stuff. And just, okay, well, how are we going to build everything internally first? Which, I was in a situation where I didn't have the right answers. I didn't have the answers on how to do that, because I had never worked at, I would say, a sophisticated agency that, had those standard procedures in place. And so I didn't really have an idea. I had to basically learn over time, okay, this is what this should look like. These are what the KPI, this is what a good KPI is. This is what a bad one. And everybody knows what dollars are good or bad. But when it comes to, conversion rates, certain amounts of, conversion rates on submittals to interviews to offers, how many counters, how many turn downs, how many just random little things that you don't really know that you kind of need in order to scale like that. But I don't know. I've just always liked the think big. It's just the bigger you think, the better your reality is going to become. Because even if you're, and that's why I like 10X. I don't know. I'm not sure if you're a Cardone guy, but that's why I like 10X, because it's but this is part of the problem though, right? Because it's 10Xing your inputs. It's 10Xing your inputs. And so, yeah, you can get to your goals by 10Xing your inputs, but how do I 10X my input? How do I get something else to do 10X the input and not me manually? That's really the code I'm trying to crack there.
Yeah, totally agree. This is definitely the forum for long answers. So if you want to share, then I will more than happily listen. I think that's a great piece of advice. so many wisdoms here. The think big is a concept or a theme that I saw throughout this entire conversation, and knowing you a little bit more than just this conversation, I know that's something you live by. The slingshot theory, I love that concept. Even the candidate packet, I thought that was a great breakdown. Yeah. So lots of really great pieces of advice here. James, I really appreciate you coming into the Sandbox.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Justin.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. If this episode brought value to you, share it with a friend and show love on social. You can tag me at Justin Lee Peters. The link to the show notes is in the episode description, and we'll include all the resources we talked about today. This episode was produced by Gabby Dimeke. I'm your host, Justin Peters. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time in the Sandbox.